Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the franchise. July 3rd. Been about a week since the last episode of the podcast. Took a little break, but we're back here today. We got a lot to go over here on today's episode. NBA free agency, a lot of signings. We're only about 4 or 5 days into free agency, and it's pretty much over. I mean, there's not many guys out there currently in free agency that are super notable. So we're going to recap a lot of the signings, as well as Damian Lillard finally requesting a trade. It seems like it's been 5 years in the making of fans and the media speculating on when Damian Lillard is going to get out of Portland, and he has finally requested a trade. We're also going to go over the MLB All Star teams, the full rosters, including the reserves, and some of the guys that got snubbed, because I think there's a lot of snubs, and some of these guys that made the All Star team as reserves, it did not deserve to be in there. And then, as always, our MLB power rankings. Before we get into the episode, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram in the description. Go follow each of those for additional content. All right, let's go here, recapping some NBA free agency moves. Started on Friday, and I mean, a lot of stuff happened pretty instantly. On free agency starts 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock Eastern on Friday, and by 6:01, you already had like 5 big time deals get signed. Let's start here though with the rookie max extensions for the guys who got drafted back in the 2019 NBA draft. Or 2020 NBA draft. I don't remember. Actually, what NBA draft is this? 2020? Anthony Edwards draft. 2020, I think. Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, and LaMelo Ball all signed for 5 years, $260 million with their teams. You know, these rookie max extensions, we always talk about it with some of these guys depending on their situation. We talked about it with Zion when he signed his rookie max extension last offseason with the Pelicans. And it was a slight conversation of maybe he doesn't sign this rookie extension so he can hit free agency sooner and get out of New Orleans. And the same thing with LaMelo Ball in this case. Maybe he doesn't sign this rookie max extension. He doesn't want to play in Charlotte. He can get out of Charlotte a lot sooner if he doesn't sign this 5-year deal than if he does. But ultimately, I don't think we've ever seen a player not sign this rookie extension for what is now $260 million. Look, if LaMelo Ball or Anthony Edwards or Tyrese Halliburton didn't want to sign one of these deals, they would have, I think they're on their last year of their rookie deal, then they're a restricted free agent in which they can just accept the qualifying offer for a few $1,000,000, and then they're an unrestricted free agent in about 2 seasons. So if LaMelo Ball wanted to leave Charlotte in about 2-3 seasons, he could be an unrestricted free agent and sign anywhere he wants. But see, none of these young 20, 21, 22-year-old, 23-year-old players are going to turn down $260 million and go elsewhere. And we thought it was a possibility. I think the closest we in recent history that we've ever came to a player declining this extension was potentially Zion Williamson. I think he doesn't want to be in New Orleans long term, but signing that deal is something that's pretty much a guaranteed for all of these guys. So those 3, Edwards, Halliburton, and LaMelo Ball, all re-sign with their teams. But the rest of free agency, going to run through some of this real quick, talk about some of these other ones a little bit more in depth. Eric Gordon signs a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Suns. Reportedly turned down a lot more money from some other contending teams around the league. He goes to Phoenix. A lot of guys have been signing with Phoenix. Maybe not a bunch of super notable guys, but they have been getting some guys in on those minimum deals to build around this team of DeAndre and Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal. That you have to fill out a roster with some guys when you pretty much can only sign minimum contracts. Eric Gordon for $3 million over the next 2 seasons, $3 million a year over the next 2 years is a very, very great deal. He provides some scoring, some, spacing the floor, some 3-point shooting. I really like Eric Gordon's game. I think he's going to help. He's going to be exactly what they need, whether he's in the starting lineup, but more than likely he's going to be off the bench, provide some veteran leadership, provide some nice locker room. He's going to really help out their locker room. And then obviously on the court, he's a tremendous role player. He's going to fit in perfectly alongside Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. Domantas Sabonis, 5-year, $217 million extension with the Sacramento Kings. Another great value deal right here. Russell Westbrook's 2-year, $8 million deal with the Clippers, $4 million a season. Russell Westbrook, I think, has found a home here with the Clippers, right? After getting traded from the Thunder to the Houston Rockets many years ago, and then bouncing from Houston to Washington to the Lakers, and then now here to the Clippers. He hadn't really found a home since he left Oklahoma City. He hasn't fit in with really any of the teams he's been on, except for last season with the Clippers. I think he fits what the Clippers are trying to do so well. They needed a guy last season to be a ball handling point guard. They tried a John Wall experiment. That didn't work out well. And alongside Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, when, sometimes those guys are injured, sometimes those guys aren't playing on any given night. Sometimes, obviously one of them is going to be on the bench. You need a guy that's going to be able to create for others. And Russell Westbrook is tremendous at doing that. And he fits so well with the Clippers. He had a great run with the Clippers last season. Dante DiVincenzo, he leaves the Warriors, goes to the Knicks, 4 years, $50 million, joining his former Villanova teammates, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. I love what the Knicks have been doing over the last few seasons, really over the last 2 years in particular. The Jalen Brunson signing has worked out tremendously. He had an amazing season last year. The Josh Hart trade was amazing. He came back to the team on a very nice team-friendly contract. He's going to be there. And then DiVincenzo, who had pretty much a career year with the Golden State Warriors last season, gets his bag, goes to the Knicks. I really like this Knicks team. They have a lot of assets. They could go out there and, if they wanted to, make a big-time star trade. But they have so many nice pieces I think complement each other super, super well. I don't think this is a title team. With Julius Randle, with Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, they have a lot of nice pieces, but I don't think they're necessarily a team that is a championship contender. But in terms of teams in the Eastern Conference, I would say the Knicks are definitely a top 5 team out east right now. The Houston Rockets, a team entering the offseason with the most cap space in the NBA. Obviously, you have to spend your cap space in the NBA. There's a cap floor, and they go out there and they spend some big time bags. Fred VanVleet, 3 years, $130 million for the 29-year-old point guard. Fred VanVleet, who has been with the Toronto Raptors his entire career. He just got the biggest contract by an undrafted player in NBA history. So, props to Fred VanVleet. But you look at what he did last season in 69 games played, put up 19.3 points per game, shot 39% from the field, 34% from three. You look to a season before that, he played 65 games, put up 20 points, shot 40% from the field and 37% from three. So with Fred VanVleet, we've seen over the last, 3, 4, 5 years, what exactly you're going to be getting out of Fred VanVleet. Since 2019-20 NBA season, 17 points, 21, he had 19 points, and then 20, and then 19 points. So over the last 4 years, what you're going to be getting out of Fred VanVleet. That's between 17 and 20 points per game, and he's going to be shooting around 41% from the field, and at best 39% from the three-point range. So him going here to Houston, this is a big-time deal, but this is what it takes for him to get pried away from a team like Toronto that he's been with his entire career, that drafted him, didn't draft him, but that signed him out of free agency, that gave him an opportunity, that he won a championship with, that he's built so much with throughout his NBA career, to pry him away from that team, to take him to Houston, a team that's more than likely going to be one of the bottom tier teams in the NBA next season. It is a good deal. It is only 3 years, right? So this is definitely a movable contract. Fred VanVleet is a movable player. If in 1 or 2 seasons there's a team out there contending for a championship that needs a point guard and Fred VanVleet is available, and maybe the Rockets aren't necessarily competing in a year or two with Fred VanVleet on roster, only $130 million over 3 years. That is a lot of money per year, per annual value. But I do think it is a good deal, provides some playmaking, is able to set guys up, is a good offensive player to go alongside Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and now the Thompson. I always forget what Thompson twin they drafted. I think it's Amen, or is it Asar? They drafted Amen Thompson. So I like what they did here with Fred VanVleet. It is a lot of money, but he is a very nice player that is going to fit very well here with Ime Udoka as the new head coach and some of the other young pieces that are on this Houston squad. And they also bring in Dillon Brooks on a 4-year, $80 million deal. After the reports came out, after the Grizzlies lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Lakers, basically saying the Grizzlies weren't going to bring back Dillon Brooks under any circumstances. A lot of talk, a lot of chatter out there. Look, Dillon Brooks might not get an NBA job, but at the end of the day, Dillon Brooks is a very, very good player. Yes, he struggled in the postseason in that first round. He didn't play great at all. He was horrible in that first round series with the Grizzlies, but he is a tremendous player. He's a gritty, in-your-face kind of defender, kind of like a Patrick Beverley type of player. But he's a tremendous defender. He's one of the best defenders in the league. He's an all-NBA defensive type player. And he is able at times to provide some offensive spark, some offensive scoring. He's not primarily going to do that, but his defense, his leadership, and what he brings on the floor is very, very impactful. So he signs for $80 million over the next 4 years. That is a big-time bag for Dillon Brooks going to Houston. Kyrie Irving returns to the Mavericks, 3 years, $126 million. I believe there's a player option after the second year of this deal, so he could opt out. The market for Kyrie was pretty much non-existent. It's either he returns to Dallas or he goes to one of these teams with tons of cap space, because I don't think the Lakers were ever a real possibility. The Suns, I know he said he was going to meet with the Suns. That didn't seem like a possibility. Philadelphia, none of these, Miami, none of these other situations for Kyrie ever seemed like a real possibility outside of Dallas. He goes back here, pairs with Luka, and we'll see how they play with the full season together there in Dallas, although they were great offensively last season. In the time that they shared defensively is basically the reason why they missed the postseason. So we'll see how they are able, to play on the defensive end with these two guys, although offensively they're going to be probably one of the best offenses in terms of backcourts in the NBA. Draymond Green also re-signs with the Warriors, 4 years, $100 million, $20 million a year. It's a nice deal for him. And then finally, I want to talk about the Lakers. I think the Lakers have had the best offseason, or at least the best free agency out of any team thus far. They have made some big-time moves. They brought back all of their guys, all three of their guys that were free agents this offseason, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell, and they brought them back on some nice deals. Hachimura returns on a 3-year, $51 million deal. You have Austin Reeves on a 4-year, $56 million deal, and D'Angelo Russell for 2 years, $37 million. Just talking about those three guys before we get to the other additions that they made, those are some really great moves. I think the D'Angelo Russell one is probably my favorite. I love Austin Reeves in that deal, but I think the D'Lo one is going to be underrated. 2 years, $37 million for a guy in D'Angelo Russell who, yes, last season in the postseason, in that Western Conference Finals run, even in the semifinals, was not a great player. He was non-existent offensively. He was unplayable. He was not a good defender. He was not a good scorer. He was just not a value. He was a negative asset when he was playing for the Lakers. But you see it during the regular season, and you saw it at times in the first round of the postseason, what he is capable of doing when he's on, when he's hot, when he's right. And that is provide tons of playmaking, tons of facilitating in the offense. And he's able to be a scorer if LeBron or AD are out for a game in the regular season, and Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. If some guys aren't having great games, D'Angelo Russell is capable of flipping the switch and becoming the lead offensive guy at any given night during the regular season. And his upside is very, very high. And for this low of a deal, I really, really like it. And if anything, in a year from now, they are able to trade D'Angelo Russell. I mean, for a 1-year deal, this is such a tradable contract that like the Lakers are able to move this deal, in a year when he only has 1 year remaining on his deal. If they want to improve, if he had a bad season, you're able to move his contract and get something out of D'Angelo Russell. The Rui Hachimura deal is amazing too. He was tremendous with the Lakers in the playoffs on the defensive end and on the offensive end as well. Austin Reeves returning on $56 million for 4 years when you thought he could potentially get a $100 million contract is great value for the Lakers. And then they also brought in a bunch of guys. I think the guys that they brought in are really, really nice fits. Gabe Vincent from the Heat, 3 years, $33 million, $11 million per season, joining this Lakers team, coming over from the Miami Heat, where he had a tremendous playoff run. He's going to be able to provide playmaking and scoring off of the bench for the Lakers. They also brought in Cam Reddish on a 2-year deal, former top 10 pick in the 2019 NBA draft. Has been given up on by a lot of teams, but I'm not saying he's going to turn into a superstar player like he once thought of when he was going to get drafted, but if he can fit his role here with this team and his athleticism, should be a nice addition, as well as Jackson Hayes, a very athletic center who was given up on by the Pelicans, coming here, and then also bring in Taurean Prince to provide some 3-and-D defense on the perimeter. So the Lakers have made tons of moves this offseason. I think each one of them is amazing. Look, this is a team that made it to the Western Conference Finals last season. I know they got swept by the Denver Nuggets, but I don't think you can look at this team and say that they got worse. I think they did get better, bringing back their 3 guys, and then bringing in Gabe Vincent, Cam Reddish, Jackson Hayes, Taurean Prince, getting younger, getting better at the areas where the Lakers kind of struggled last season in the postseason and at times during the regular season. So the Lakers, I think, are the clear winners of free agency, in my opinion. All right, let's get to Damian Lillard requesting a trade. Seems like it's been 4 or 5 years in the making that we've been waiting for Dame to request a trade. I didn't think it was going to happen. I never thought we were going to get to the point where Damian Lillard was going to request a trade from the Portland Trailblazers. But here we are. Damian Lillard officially requested a trade from the Blazers on Saturday after seeing what they did in free agency, which was re-signing Jeremy Grant on a 5-year deal, drafting Scoot Henderson number 3 overall, not bringing in another star player to pair alongside him in Portland. And his time there is pretty much over. And he wants to go to the Miami Heat. That is his preferred destination. But I also think, and there's some reports of some other teams potentially interested in Damian Lillard, the Clippers, the Sixers, and the Brooklyn Nets. I'm going to be giving out a hypothetical 4-team trade. This is a very complicated 4-team trade that I just came up with before we started recording here. But I think I think it's possible. There's 4 teams involved here. I think each of these 4 teams is definitely getting some value in this trade. And we'll get into that right now. 4-team trade with the 76ers, the Miami Heat, the Clippers, and the Blazers. Obviously, James Harden, he accepted his player option. Instead of electing to go to free agency, he accepts his player option and he requests a trade from the Philadelphia 76ers. So this trade involves James Harden, involves Damian Lillard, it involves the Clippers, the Blazers, the Heat, and the Sixers. So I have the 76ers receiving Tyler Hero, Anthony Simons, Norman Powell, and Amir Coffey. The Miami Heat receiving Damian Lillard and Marcus Morris. The Clippers getting James Harden, Kevin Love, and Nikola Jovic. And the Portland Trailblazers getting Jason Preston, Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, and then however many first-round picks you want to put in this trade. The Clippers, the Heat, and the Sixers, they can also swap first-round picks, get some other picks in there as well. I just didn't put any picks in this trade. So going through here, the Sixers, they're getting rid of Harden. They're getting rid of Tobias Harris, and Tyrese Maxey. But they are receiving Tyler Hero, Anthony Simons, Norman Powell. I think this improves I wouldn't say it necessarily improves their team. I honestly think they're probably losing this trade now that I think about it. You're giving up Tyrese Maxey, and you're not getting back Damian Lillard. You're also losing James Harden. I think the only way, this trade sucks. This trade sucks. The trade I just made sucks now that I talk about it. This is not a realistic trade. We're not going to talk about this trade anymore because why would the Sixers trade Tyrese Maxey if they're not getting Damian Lillard? And who knows if they even would trade Tyrese Maxey. All the reports are saying that they don't want to, that they view him as the second star next to Joel Embiid now that James Harden's more than likely on his way out. So getting Tyler Hero, Anthony Simons, and Norman Powell in return for Tyrese Maxey doesn't seem to be a nice return. Although Simons is able to run some offense, Tyler Hero provides some shooting. Norman Powell was a nice piece off of the bench. I guess if we were to look at this trade, the Clippers getting Harden is a very nice addition to go with Kevin Love. It's another great pickup. The Heat getting Lillard and Morris to provide some depth on this team on the wing. And then Lillard, obviously the centerpiece of this trade. And then the Blazers getting Maxey, 4 first-round picks, and then a bunch of salary relief in Kyle Lowry and Tobias Harris. This trade honestly doesn't make any sense. I think it's of the part of the 76ers because why would they trade Tyrese Maxey if they're not getting Damian Lillard? So maybe this trade would work. Honestly, now that I think about it, I think this trade is pretty stupid. I don't think it would work. All right. Real quick, if I do think Dame will get traded, and now the Blazers obviously have a few different ways to look at this. Do they trade Dame to a team that he wants to go to? Do they trade him to the Miami Heat? Because he has been loyal to this franchise for like 13, 14 years of his career, his entire career. Do they trade him to a place that he wants to go? Or do they do what's best for the organization and look elsewhere? Look at potentially Brooklyn with all of the assets that they can trade in terms of draft picks. Do they look at some other teams that we're not talking about right now that have a better package in return for Damian Lillard? And the thought that teams, superstar players, are going to look at what the Blazers do when they trade Damian Lillard and think it's going to impact them is ridiculous. If the Blazers trade Damian Lillard to the San Antonio Spurs or to the Utah Jazz, a place that he doesn't necessarily want to go to because he wants to go to the Miami Heat, the Blazers are going to be fine. It's not these superstar players that are looking at this situation apparently are not going to look at the Blazers and not want to sign there in free agency now that they traded Damian Lillard to a place he didn't want to go to. Because superstar players aren't signing with the Portland Trail Blazers. There's never been a superstar player that is signed with the Portland Trail Blazers. And there's no player that's going to request a trade from the Blazers, from their team and say, the Lakers, the Heat, the Knicks are all teams I'd want to go to, but I really, really, really would like to go to Portland. However, the way they treated Damian Lillard, I do not want to be traded there as much as I'd love to play there. That is not going to happen. No superstar player is signing or requesting a trade to the Portland Trail Blazers. That is a place that you get out of. The only way the Blazers are able to build their team in a very efficient way and get superstars is through the draft or through trades, not through free agency or not through a player requesting a trade. So the fact that people are saying that the Blazers have to trade Dame to the Heat to protect their reputation of getting other superstar level players is just not a reality. It is completely false because why would a superstar player go to Portland? What was the last all-star level, superstar level player to request a trade or sign with the Portland Trail Blazers? The MLB All Star teams were announced. I think these teams kind of suck. First of all, the voting is stupid. It really is. I think the All Star starters are fine. The AL, Jonah Heim, Yanni Diaz, Marcus Semien, Josh Young, Corey Seager, Mike Trout, Randy Rosarena, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani. And on the NL, Sean Murphy, Freddie Freeman, Luis Arias, Nolan Arenado, Orlando Arcia, Ronald Acuna Jr., Mookie Betts, Corbin Carroll, JD Martinez. I think that's all fine. The starters are I think are fine. I wouldn't say there's anything I necessarily disagree with in terms of the all-star starters in the AL and the NL. What I do disagree with is these all-star reserves, because I think these MLB all-star reserves are really, really bad. I need to pull it up here real quick. I think one of the biggest problems, as I'm pulling it up here, with the MLB All-Star game and the way that this voting process goes in terms of selecting reserves is that for some reason, every single team needs to have an all-star. All 30 teams have to be represented in the all-star game for some reason. And there is not 30, not all of these teams have all-stars. The Oakland A's, the Detroit Tigers, the Washington Nationals, the Kansas City Royals, I don't think any of those teams have any all-star worthy player on that team, especially when you look at the snubs, and we'll get to the snubs in a minute. But I put down some players here that I think don't deserve to be all-stars. I think these are the players that are big-time question marks on why exactly they are MLB All-Stars this season. First one is Kenley Jansen. Boston Red Sox made it as a reliever, a 3.54 ERA this season, 17 saves, a 135 ERA plus. His FIP is at a 3.01. He's having a good season. I think there is a reliever or two in the American League that definitely deserve this spot over Kenley Jansen in just terms of relievers. And in terms of any pitcher, regardless of starter or reliever, I mean, I think there's 3 or 4 guys that should be in over Kenley Jansen. Kenley Jansen's having a good season, but there's a bunch of guys that got snubbed from the All-Star team that are having way better years than Kenley Jansen is with the Boston Red Sox. Michael Lorenzen of the Tigers is an All-Star. He is not having an All-Star season. His ERA is a 4.28. He has an ERA plus of 100, which is league average. His FIP is at a 4.32. And he has a 6.8 strikeout per 9 rate. The Tigers, if they need a guy to represent them in the All-Star game, use one of their relievers, because Michael Lorenzen is not having an All-Star season compared to guys that we'll get to later on in terms of starting pitchers and relievers that are way, way better, who have been way better throughout the course of the season than Michael Lorenzen has with the Tigers this season. I think Salvador Perez doesn't deserve to be an All-Star. I think he's one of the most overrated players in Major League Baseball. 15 home runs for him this season, a 253 average. His OPS is at a 741, a 102 OPS plus. His strikeout rate, his walk rate, his chase rate are all in the bottom percentiles of Major League Baseball, and he has some of the worst defense behind the plate in the game, despite him winning multiple Gold Gloves throughout his career. He's never been a great defensive catcher. I think he's extremely overrated, and I don't think he deserves to be an All-Star reserve. You already have 2 catchers on this All-Star team, Jonah Heim and Adley Rutschman. Both those guys deserve it. I don't think you need a 3rd catcher on this All-Star roster, especially not a guy who doesn't deserve to be an All-Star, like Salvador Perez. We'll get to the snubs in a minute. There's a bunch of guys that could have replaced Salvador Perez here on this All-Star team. Also, Whit Merrifield doesn't deserve to be an All-Star. 282 average with 2 home runs. His OPS is at a 700. He has a 9. What does that say? A 180 OPS plus. I don't know what I wrote down right there. But Whit Merrifield is not having a season like a guy, like a Wander Franco, who we'll get to in a minute, who deserves to be in over Whit Merrifield. And then my final snub, this is the only snub, in my opinion, from the National League, Dansby Swanson of the Cubs. 9 homers, a 256 average, and a 743 OPS. I don't think that's all-star worthy. Dansby Swanson was an all-star last year and had a way better season than he's having right now in Chicago. All right, getting to my snubs. First snub, Fernando Tatis Jr., Padres outfielder, has been amazing. After missing the first 25 games of the season with suspension, he has been elite. A 280 average, 16 home runs, 867 OPS, a 3.7 WAR, and he's one of the best defensive right fielders in the game. His arm is incredible. No players running on him if the ball is hit to right field. His range, his outs above average, his defensive runs saved. Fernando Tatis Jr. is all around an amazing player this season. The fact that he's not an all-star is very, very surprising to me. Wander Franco, I mentioned a few minutes ago, he should be in over a guy like Whit Merrifield. Franco was a finalist for the starting shortstop position, and now he's not even an all-star. And he's one of the best hitters in the game this season with a 283 average, 9 homers, 802 OPS. He has a 4.2 WAR at this point this season. That is all-star worthy compared to a guy like Whit Merrifield. Brandon Nimmo of the Mets, he definitely should be in the All-Star game. A 279 average, 12 homers, 830 OPS, and a 2.3 WAR with the New York Mets. Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan should be in over Michael Lorenzen in terms of starting pitching in the American League. 3.44 ERA this season, 105 strikeouts. He has a 124 ERA plus a .972 whip and 9.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. He has basically been the best pitcher on that Minnesota Twins pitching staff the entire season. Pablo Lopez has been great, but Joe Ryan, Sonny Gray has been amazing too. Sonny Gray made the All-Star team, but Joe Ryan has arguably been, outside of Sonny Gray, the best pitcher on this Minnesota Twins roster, and he is not an All-Star. Blake Snell of the Padres should be an All-Star. 3.21 ERA, 114 strikeouts, a 127 ERA plus, and a 1.207 WHIP. I think since June started, all of his starts in June, he's been dominant on the mound. And he needs to be in the All-Star game. And when you look at who he could replace in the National League in terms of an All-Star, get rid of Josiah Gray, get rid of Mitch Keller, and put in Blake Snell. Tyler Wells of the Baltimore Orioles with a 3.21 ERA, 95 strikeouts, a .858 WHIP. That's the best in baseball. And his opponent batting average is at a 214. So he's been one of the best pitchers in the American League this season in terms of opponent batting average, WHIP, and just the way he's been pitching. I know strikeout numbers are below 100, but he's been one of the most efficient pitchers this season for a Baltimore Orioles team that is one of the best teams in the league. He should be an All-Star. 4 more here. David Bednar of the Pirates, a 1.44 ERA, 16 saves. Johan Duran of the Minnesota Twins with a 1.93 ERA, 12 saves. Carlos Estevez of the Angels needs to be an All-Star, especially over a guy like Kenley Jansen, a 1.85 ERA, 21 saves on the season. I believe he's perfect in his save opportunities this season, a perfect 21 for 21 and a 1.265 WHIP in Anaheim. And then finally, Brandon Drury with the Angels as well. 14 home runs, 277 average, an 822 OPS, and a 122 OPS plus. And he's played all around the infield. He's played first, he's played second. I think he's played some third. But put him in at second base, replace Whit Merrifield, because Brandon Drury has been so much better than Whit Merrifield has been this season. And the fact that he's not an All-Star, but a guy like Whit Merrifield is, who pretty much does nothing offensively in terms of, OPS, slugging. Whit Merrifield, yeah, he has a higher average, a 282 average compared to a 277. But average doesn't mean anything in these days. It's about home runs. It's about OPS, getting on base. And Brandon Drury has been amazing this season for the Angels. He should be an All-Star. So I think all of those guys I just listed deserve to be All-Stars. And at the end of the day, it comes down to Major League Baseball, for some reason, requiring every single team to be represented in the All Star game, and that just shouldn't be how it is. If you're going to make it so every single team needs to be represented in the All Star game, you got to have the best players on each team because, I mean, Michael Lorenzen shouldn't be an all-star. He shouldn't. A 4.28 ERA is not an all-star level player. In any given season, those are not all-star numbers. I think there's definitely players on the Detroit Tigers that are having better seasons than Michael Lorenzen. I mean, I'm going to look at it right now because there's definitely a pitcher or even a position player on this roster who is having a better year than Michael Lorenzen. I mean, Riley Green. Riley Green, he's probably still injured. Last time I checked, he was injured. He's played 52 games this season with 5 home runs, a 296 average, and 805 OPS. I don't think he qualifies. I mean, he's only played 52 out of like 80 plus games. But on the pitching side, Eduardo Rodriguez, he's only played in 11 games, 67 innings pitched, but he has a 2.13 ERA. Alex Lange has a 3.89 ERA in 34 innings pitched. He probably deserves the All-Star nod. Or even a Tyler Holton with a 2.06 ERA in 43 innings pitched with a 1.05 whip and a 230 batting average against, as having a way better season than a Michael Lorenzen. So look, the fact that every team needs to be represented in the MLB All-Star game, I think is silly. You don't have every single team represented in the NBA All-Star game. That's just not how it works. Like, yes, it's different because of how many players play in the NBA All-Star game compared to the MLB All-Star game. But when you have snubs like Tatis, Wander Franco, Brandon Nimmo, Carlos Estevez, those guys are all-stars. They're having all-star level seasons. They're having tremendous seasons. And they're not getting credited for the All-Star game compared to guys on bad teams like Michael Lorenzen, like Josiah Gray, like Whit Merrifield, that don't deserve to be all-stars, quite frankly. Not saying that those guys aren't good players, but they are not having all-star level seasons compared to guys that are not currently on the team. Now, obviously, there's going to be guys that don't play in the game, that get injured, that sit out, and you'll have some replacement players. But still, I mean, these guys, the fact that they didn't make it to either starting or reserving, and they're most likely going to be replacement players, I think is a disrespect to those guys. All right, we're going to say the MLB Power Rankings for another episode, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll be back with another episode. We're almost at 40 minutes on this episode. So we'll be back Tuesday or Wednesday with another episode of the franchise